Hello, thank you very much for joining me again. I'd like to share with you a story titled The 60-Year-Old Little Girl. It was published in a Chicken Soup for the Soul book called The Spirit of America back in 2016. I hope you enjoy it. Like most Americans, I'm baffled by why so many people in other countries dislike America. I usually write it off as jealousy of our success, not because I'm arrogant, but because I've visited many other countries and I've seen the difference. I also usually point out that most of the world dreams about living in America, and very few Americans are trying to leave. Of course, the option Americans have to go somewhere else if they want to is another basic freedom denied to many around the world. I once had a long conversation with a man in Marmaris, Turkey, who thought America was too aggressive militarily and too imperialistic politically. I argued that America is the only country that ever fought wars with nothing in it for them, World War II and Bosnia, to name two, and that America is the only country that not only didn't occupy countries it defeated, but rebuilt what it destroyed: Japan, Germany, Iraq, etc. I was in my early 20s the first time I encountered hatred of America. I had just graduated from college and was living and working on the farm of a friend in England. I'd been there for about a week when her mother arrived home from a business trip and made dinner for us. It didn't take long before she launched into an all-out attack on America. I didn't immediately spring to America's defense for two reasons. First, she was over 60, and I was still young enough to be a little intimidated by aggressive older people. And secondly, I'd been influenced by college professors who had successfully muddled the patriotism I felt before starting college, insisting that Americans had much to feel guilty about. They ridiculed students who dared to even disagree with them. This left me not only wondering if their criticisms of America were true, but also less likely to question authority, which is ironic because questioning authority is one thing most of those same professors ostensibly promoted. Apparently, they were referring to authority only outside of their own classrooms. So there I was in that English farmhouse, sharing a bottle of wine with my friend's mother and listening to her run down America in every way possible. Her speech was obviously well rehearsed, as if she'd said it 1,000 times, and she probably had. In fact, I was starting to feel like I was back in college. I can't recall every point she made that night. All I remember, and all that really matters, is how the conversation ended. We'd been talking for about 2 hours, and because she was a very pedantic and difficult woman to have a civil discussion with, and for the reasons I mentioned before, her age and the confusion college had left me with, I let her do most of the talking. Maybe it was my silence that caused her to suddenly change, or maybe it was the wine, but she said, "Okay, so that's what I don't like about America. Would you like to know what I do love about it?" After such a tirade, I eagerly said yes. "I love America," she continued, "because when something goes wrong in the world, people look to America for help. They don't look into the reporters' cameras, clutching their children in their arms and barely alive from war or starvation or some natural calamity, and demand help from other countries. It's always America, as if America is obligated to help everyone everywhere. And America always shows up, whether there's something in it for them or not. America leads the charge. In fact, most other countries wait to see what America will do before deciding if they're going to do anything. So despite your country's mistakes, it's still the beacon of light to the world it has always been, and it's still the greatest hope for mankind." You know the emoji with the head popping off and the steam or whatever coming out, like a mind-blown emoji? That's what I was at that moment. I was completely flabbergasted and intrigued to figure out why a woman who just spent the better part of 2 hours ripping America up and down suddenly gave it such a glowing review. So she went on to tell me about a faint memory she had from her childhood of her mother holding her and waving to American GIs who were passing through London during a victory parade the day World War II ended. One of them smiled at her and handed her a candy bar. She watched as her mother hugged him and cried into his chest like they were old friends. Other GIs played with children. There was hugging and kissing and waving and cheering everywhere. She said, "To say it was a happy day doesn't even begin to do it justice. It was like being awakened from a nightmare." She talked about the nights she and her parents had to hide in air raid shelters, and how they had sat huddled in fear listening to the dull thuds of Nazi bombs falling on buildings in the distance, not knowing if their home or their friends' homes would be there when they returned. So many buildings were on fire, she said. It was like an aerial view of hell. Her eyes welled with tears as she told this story. She even sobbed a little when she was finished, as if she knew she was contradicting all of her previous criticisms, or that the weight of what she just said reduced them all to the point of irrelevancy. Then, this formerly imperious Englishwoman softened, smiled at me, and asked, "Can I give you a hug?" It was just getting better and better. Again, this may have been inspired by her secret love of America, or the wine, or both, probably both, but I was glad to accept it either way. We embraced for a few seconds, and I went to pull away, but she held on a little longer. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't me she was hugging. She was hugging that GI who gave her candy 50 years earlier and let her and her mother know the nightmare was over. As I've remembered that night over the years, I've wondered if her cynicism about America stemmed from disappointment in policy decisions since World War II that didn't rise to the levels of honesty, goodness, and integrity that were personified in that GI, that soldier who was hardly more than a boy himself and who had just witnessed mankind at its worst, but still managed to kneel down, smile warmly at a little girl, and give her candy. Maybe he set the bar too high for any country to live up to. Men of the greatest generation could do that. I've known a few. They were a hard act to follow, not only in terms of courage, but also of integrity and goodness. Whatever it was that compelled her to traverse the spectrum from hate to love that night, that hug taught me more about America and its perception around the world than all those college professors combined. And despite the times America has stumbled, I have seen my country just the way she described it, as a beacon of light for the world and mankind's greatest hope ever since.
Hey, thank you so much for listening. I hope this story entertained and inspired you. If it did, please consider giving it a like, leaving a comment, subscribing to the channel if you haven't yet, and sharing this story with friends and family who might enjoy it too. Thanks again for joining me on this adventure, and I hope to see you on the next one.